Your first fight, you fought Mark Fernelli, and I just saw that actually today. I got to watch it on YouTube. What was it like when you got there to that arena that day for your first pro debut fight? Were you nervous? Were you scared? Did you think it was another day in the office? You were going to be like naked there instead of, you're not going to have your shirt on. You're not going to have the headgear. You're going to have lighter gloves. You're going to get hit harder. I mean, was that a totally different experience? Were you pretty nervous for that?
Well, when I fought my first pro fight against Mark Fernelli, it was on ESPN. Coming out of the Olympics, I was kind of highly touted, so they said, okay, you got the pro contract with the top rank. And when I went to Bob Adams' house in Malibu to sign the contract, which is cool. I was on TV almost every time I fought, so I had a lot of things to live up to. I was a little bit nervous, mostly because people started expecting things from you, They expect you to win and to take them on a ride like you did when you were younger. Being part of the Olympic program and being an Olympian in the beginning was like, whoa, it was great. But all of a sudden it brings all these things. People say like, whoa, now we expect you to win, So like, that's tough. I was on TV and it was my first pro fight. The thing about it for me is that growing up in LA in that time, we had a lot of world champions we were sparring with and training with. So guys like me and Oscar, we were born pro boxers from the age of like 10 years old and on. So being a pro was natural. But for full fight, it was very natural. I got to take my time. I got to use my power punches. I knocked the guy out. Something that rarely happens in amateur boxing. So it wasn't hard.
And you win your first 4 fights by knockout. The first 3 were actually pretty quick in the first and second round. Your 5th fight, you end up losing by decision, and you were down twice during the fight. To lose like one of your first fights there, and everybody's expectations of you being this Olympian, was that a big setback for you? Because not so much because it would be, a setback for anybody else, because anybody can just bounce back, but because you were an Olympian, was that a big setback for you and, people's minds and people's expectations of you?
I fought a tough guy. We didn't expect what we were going to get. When you're young and you have 3 wins, easy knockouts, you think, okay, you expect more of the same, right? I fought a guy that I probably shouldn't have fought then. He had a lot of experience. He was really strong. The first time, when you fight an amateur, you use big, fluffy 10-ounce gloves. You fight pro, you use these little tiny gloves. And this guy caught me by surprise. I went down a couple times. I got up. I actually woke up after he knocked me down the first time because I came in really like out of it. I was sleepy or something. I wasn't there. And I came back and I fought hard. He caught me a couple times. I think if he didn't knock me down those 2 times, I would have probably pulled the decision, but he didn't drop me, and then the point system changed, and it made it into a really difficult, tough fight, and the guy won the fight. So.
And his name was Joshua Renteria.
Renteria, correct.
And the next fight, the 6th fight, you being there from LA, I'm sure you heard all the stories from all your life, of LA with all the history of all the big fights there. You're going to fight at the Olympic Auditorium where it's, notorious for having crazy crowds, and they have a wild, mean crowd. If you don't perform well, they're going to be on you in a second. You go ahead and fight that fight here. And what was that like, man, going through that crazy tunnel in this historic event that I believe opened up in the mid-20s with even, I think, Jack Dempsey, the heavyweight champion at that time, was there for the opening of that, venue. What was it like fighting at this historic venue?
The first time I went to the Olympic Auditorium was when I was a little kid. And I didn't know what the big deal was then, but it was when Julio Cesar Chavez won the world title. No one knew who he was.
Wow, really? Against Mario Asabeche
Martinez? Yeah, I was there that night. And no one knew who he was. And my dad, he got me and my brother, and we went down there. And it was like 100% Mexican crowd, hardcore fans. There was not a seat available, and there's people standing in the aisles. Really hardcore fight.
Did you smell all that smoke in your lungs there?
There was smoke in the lungs. There was fights in the crowd every 5 minutes, people throwing chairs, and this is a really rowdy, amazing experience. Something you can't even imagine. And that night, Chavez won the title. When we left, and the crowd was like nothing you're ever going to see again. When we left, we were walking out the back. We left early because we wanted to beat the crowd. And me and my brother, my dad walked out, and at the same time, a limo pulled up, and the only other non-Mexican person in that arena was Don King. He snuck out the back because he walked in there to look at Chavez win the title, and I think after that he signed him and made him into what he was. I got to see that, But fighting the Olympic was amazing. Fight things like that.
I'm sure your dad was a big boxing fan, and you probably were too. Growing up, what fighters did you guys follow, or what were some of your guys' favorite fighters?
When I was growing up, Chavez, I was my man always. He used to spar at the gyms, and we used to watch him. Remember, there's a guy named Marcus Villasana. There's Uzuma Nelson was always in the gyms. They're all sparring or with each other or against other people, or whatever. But they're always there.
And he was actually the opponent of another Mexican great, the last opponent of Salvador Sanchez.
Salvador, exactly, yeah. From Nelson fought Salvador Sanchez.
How about your dad? What were some of his favorites back then?
He started watching boxing like in the 70s, so he like guys like Alberto Davila and Daniel Red Lopez and all the guys that were on Friday Night Fights, I guess.
And all the guys that fought there at the Olympics.
At the Olympics, correct. I grew up with those guys in my mind because he was always talking about them.
Do you think he had some of that expectation of you being one of those guys one day, like those guys that he used to watch?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, he growing up with these guys and being in the gym with them and stuff, it's like, we should start when he fights, like, oh, now we got to meet this demand these people are telling us to do in so many ways, Stuff.
And you rack up, about 7 or 8 victories there, and then you fight in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and you suffer a first-round knockout, man. And
I fought a guy who was in Albuquerque who was an amateur when I was an amateur, and I knew who he was, and I didn't think nothing of him. I thought, okay, it's nothing. This is not going to be anything. I came out. He threw a lot of punches. He caught me in the back of the head. Okay, I saw the punch coming, and I went down on one knee, and they stopped the fight, and there was nothing you could do. It's one of those things. And when I was in the dressing room, I saw myself like, damn, that was so quick. It happened right away. What can you do? He caught me in the back of the head, and I went down, and I guess the referee didn't like the way I looked. I got up right away.
People don't understand, when this type of stuff happens and they stop fights too early or whatever. I mean, how it affects somebody. I mean, it gets kind of crazy, and it seems to be happening more and more often, even today.
Yeah. See, I don't want to talk bad about people because people do their jobs the best they can. Sometimes, and then it looks bad. So you can't talk bad about everybody that makes the sport look bad all the time because some people are just doing their job. But there's been a lot of bad decisions lately, and there's been a lot of things that would be considered suspicious decisions. The referees get involved and things like that. We haven't gotten to that yet, but I trained Ray Beltran, and we just fought in Scotland, and we went over there and we beat Ricky Burns down, chased him around the ring, dropped him in the 8th round, broke his jaw. And then we got robbed.
Oh yeah, we're gonna get to that right now.
Yeah,
Trust me on that one. I just had Ray on a few weeks ago.
These guys don't understand. They don't understand or they don't consider the fact that other people's lives are at stake.
And we'll talk about that right now. But back to you. You lose this fight here in Albuquerque. The next fight you lose on points too. You win a few after that. You lose another one there. You fight one more. You win that, and that was the end of your career there. And that's pretty early for someone
my last fight, I won a decision. The fight before that, I was in Detroit with Emmanuel Stewart. After turning pro in '93, I signed on with De La Hoya and his group, Team De La Hoya. We went up to Big Bear, and we basically lived in Big Bear. We started that whole thing up there. I think there was one gym and maybe one other camp, but there was nothing there. We remember driving up in 3 feet of snow, and we expected to get up and run the whole nine, right? And beginning in the beginning, I was basically trained by wherever he was being trained by. Towards the end there, Emmanuel Stewart took over for Oscar, and me and Emmanuel became really good friends. And when Oscar De La Hoya fired Emmanuel Stewart, I decided to leave De La Hoya camp and go to Detroit and fight with Emmanuel Stewart for Kronk. So when I was in Detroit fighting with Emmanuel for Kronk, that last fight I fought over there, I ended up breaking my hands, both hands, in that fight. I fought a guy from New York, left southpaw.
Yeah, Mark Richardson at the Joe Louis Arena, the historic Joe Louis Arena.
Tommy Hearns was the main event that night. I think it was one of his last fights. And Emmanuel Stewart showed up to the arena late, and he wrapped my hands really quickly because he had to go wrap his hands. And when I came out in the first round, I was probably the best training camp I ever had. And I felt so strong, and it was I remember how good I felt because I remember I wasn't nervous at all, and I was like, damn, I felt so good. I went in there and I just went crazy. And coming back after the first round against Richardson, I had dropped him 3 times, and they didn't have a 3 knockdown rule there in Michigan. Knocked the guy down 3 times, came back, and I said, this guy won't go down. He won't stay down, all right? After the first round, I came back, and I go, shoot, man, I think my right hand's broken. And he looked at me and said, you want me to stop the fight? And I go, no, let me I'll go get him out of this round, right? And so the next 3 rounds, I proceeded to try to stop this guy, get him out of there, but this guy kept getting up. I dropped him 5 times in that fight, and he got up every time. By the 4th round, I was like, all right, this is getting crazy. So I said, okay, I'm going to send him up for one final, get my best punches with my left hook. One final punch, and I set him up, came in, I threw my big left hook, hit him on top of the head, broke the left hand. So I fought the rest of the fight with 2 broken hands. And by the last round, I couldn't throw any more punches. So I basically was just surviving. I ended up winning the fight, but after that, my hands were pretty much busted up and they were useless. I fought again and sparred and everything. That was it.
And you being in De La Hoya's Olympic team in '92, and knowing him for all those years, and even since you guys were kids, from let's say that time to when you stopped training with them, like let's say in Big Bear after him and Emmanuel Stewart broke ties there. Do you think there was a big change in De La Hoya, and whether it be his attitude and who he was, or was he the same De La Hoya that you always knew?
Oh yeah, yeah. Ross is cool. He's a down to earth guy and smart guy. Of course, yeah.
What made you finish at that point? What made you stop your career?
My hands were broken. I had 2 broken hands. I mean, without that, you can't really be a boxer anymore. So I took a year off. I tried to fight again. I won the fight, but I fought a guy that I should have knocked out in the first round, but I ended up going to the decision. And after that fight, I said, I don't think I can do this anymore. So I waited a couple more years to see if my hands would feel better, and they didn't. So that was pretty much it.
And since then, how did you stay active in boxing?
Well, I took a couple years off. I did other things. I started doing acting. I started doing commercials originally. Someone came in on the gym one day and said, "You should come off for an audition." And I went to the audition. I ended up getting this national commercial for Puma. And next thing you know, I have an agent and a manager for acting. And so they started sending me on auditions. So next thing you know, I'm doing TV shows and I'm doing small parts in movies. So I did that for a couple of years, and then after a while, they tried to get me to be on this TV show, and they gave me this big giant bunch of pages to read on an audition. I said, "Oh man, I can't do this." So I went back to the gym and I started training people.
Now, you think from all your boxing career and all your amateur fights and all the times since you were 7 years old that you were fighting, do you feel any injuries besides your 2 broken hands? Do you have anything else like where you say, "Man, I think this is starting to catch up to me, and I think this has something to do with my boxing career"? Do you feel anything like that nowadays?
Nothing except for my hands. I was fortunate enough to learn how to box properly. I was considered a boxer puncher, but I always try to make defense first. So I never was the guy who took all the punches or whatever. So I didn't suffer any of that kind of trauma. I was lucky enough to have a good body, man. I ran and I did exercise, and I never injured anything except for my hands when I broke them.
And that's an awesome thing. Now, of course, how did you meet Ray Beltran?
I met Ray Beltran when Emmanuel Stewart was training me. There was his assistant was a guy from Phoenix, and we became really good friends. And even after we left, after we came back to LA after leaving Detroit and staying here, we kept in contact. And one day he sent me a tape and he goes, "You got to see this kid. He's 16 and he's really good. He's got 2 pro fights and that." So he showed me the tape, and not long after that, we started working together. And all these years later, we're still together.
How do you see him maturing in front of you, since the first time you saw him or the first time you worked with him to, let's say, his last fight? And we'll bring up the rest of what happened there at that fight. But, how do you see him maturing, and what do you think of his progress?
I think that he is reaching his peak now in the sport. He's at the point, I think boxers in general, they're starting to hit their maturity in the early 30s. They're smarter now than before. Back in the day, a boxer was done at 29, because they either didn't take care of themselves properly or didn't have the proper training. They don't have the modern training. They didn't have the right diets. They didn't get enough sleep or whatever. Not. Boxers are getting smarter and they're lasting longer. Ray's been there for a long time. He had a lot of issues with managers and promoters. We've been with Don King before. We've had to go all the way down to Panama and Mexico to fight, and then we've been with these people, and we finally settled down, and we got a good manager. We got Steve Fader, who works with us at Wildcard, and he's really good friends with Top Rank. We got the Top Rank contract now. Once we found the right place to sit, then things started working out. We got the right fights. We went and we challenged Hank Lundy in Atlantic City when he was #1 contender in the world. He was going to fight Adrian Broner next, and in his hometown we went and we beat him. I've never seen Ray lose a fight, except when he fought in Panama. He got caught with some punches and he ended up getting stopped. And even that fight, he almost came back and knocked the guy out. He's never lost a fight that I've seen him lose. All the fights that he's fought in the last couple of years, he's won the fights, but they didn't give him the decision because he was in the hometown of the Golden Boy fighter, and on TV, the Showtime fighter. So he's smart. He went as an example for the other guys. Ray Beltran. He went the hard way. There's two roads: the easy way and the hard way. Ray went the hard way, and now that he's where he's at right now, he's the top two guys in the world. He's there with all that experience, so he's a much better man for it.
Yeah, he's very much a blue collar type worker. This last fight, man, Ricky Burns. This was going to happen in his backyard of Denmark, and going over there to Denmark, a lot of people knew, or a lot of people were already saying before the fight even happened. They said to win over there, he's going to have to knock him out, or else there might be some bad judging. That's pretty much what happened that night. Ray Beltran won almost every round in my book. They gave it a draw, thus robbing him of getting that victory and that title over Ricky Burns over there in Denmark. How did you see this fight?
Going into the fight, I didn't have any expectations. Everyone's saying you got to knock him out to win, blah, 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 right? But the way I see it is if you go in there and do the job the right way, the right thing will happen. So once the fight was actually fought, yeah, I thought there's no chance that they're going to take the fight away from Ray. Ray's known for having his fight stolen from him. But after he dropped Ricky Burns in the 8th round, after he beat him down most of the fight, he chases him around the ring and, pretty much had him surviving, I thought there's no way they're going to take this fight away from him. He's on TV. That's a big thing. People have to watch. They watch, and they're watching it not only in that part of the world, but they catch it all across the world. So they got to answer for that. There's no way they can take it away from him, and they ended up finding the one way to make it reasonable for them is giving him a draw, robbing Ray of being world champion right now.
What would you like to see happen in this? Is a rematch the right thing to do, or you think he just won and he should just go forward into his career?
Well, we're a team, and we all have a say, and we have an input. I don't have a say. We have an input in what we think should happen next. Ray listens. He has for advice what we should do next. I think that we need to go back there and fight Ricky again, and get the belt and bring it back. That we're negotiating that right now, trying to make it happen. The WBO ordered Ricky Burns to fight Terence Crawford next, but we're trying to appeal that. We're trying to find a way out of that. So it's very possible we can in the next week or two that we can maybe make that happen if possible. I think that if Ray goes back there again and he fights Ricky again, he'll definitely come back with the belt. There's some things I think Ray could have done better when he had him on the ropes or when he was trying to get the ring off. So there's things I'll put in his ear so we can work on these things. But my job is to make sure that he gets the best possible training camp.
And having you, with all your experience, everything you've been through in your life, everything you explained today, that you've gone through Olympics, through you fighting as from when you were a kid to everything you've done after that, Pepe, man, my final thoughts on you is I've always wanted to speak to you. I've always wanted to have that '92 Olympian that I always hear about, and along with all the other guys, all the '96 Olympians I always hear of also. But I've always heard of PEPE REILLY, and when I talked to Ray Beltran in my head, I said, man, I've never spoken to PEPE REILLY, man. So it was an honor and a pleasure to finally get you on, man, and get your thoughts on your career, what happened to you in your life, and what's still happening to you, and how you're still involved in boxing. Amigo, thank you very much for coming on to theboxingbar.com, and it was a pleasure and honor, like I said, to have you on, man.
It was my pleasure, man. You're a really good interviewer, and you have a lot of respect for the sport. So always good to talk to people like you. So I thank you.